So as I mentioned, I'm going to talk to you about a couple of things today. I'm going to talk to you about how we came to be, a little bit about why, what we do, and kind of why we do it, why we believe in it. Just by way of background, so I'm Wharton, class of 2005. Our company is based here. We're a little over. We're about 2.5 years old now. We have about 60 people. We have offices in Philly, New York, and Seattle. And we currently work with about 500 of the world's largest brands, brands that you probably know of, Urban Outfitters, BuzzFeed, J.Crew, stuff like that. A lot of retail kind of clothing, apparel brands, and then a lot of publishing and auto brands as well. Before we were Curalate, though, we were a company called Storably. So you guys know Airbnb? We were Airbnb for parking and storage. This is what we got funded for. Our investors are First Round Capital and a group called NEA, which is the largest VC fund in the United States. And they backed us for this idea, and we were funded for this in mid to late 2011. And we decided, Airbnb had just raised $100 million and at $1.2 billion valuation. So everybody in the venture world was going gaga for like that whole industry, this what they called collaborative consumption at the time. And one of the things you'll notice about the venture industry is there's like a fashion element to it. So if something's hot and you go in and pitch something that's in a hot space, there's a lot of interest. So Airbnb had just raised a bunch of money. We went in and said, hey, we're going to be Airbnb for parking and storage. They were like, well, we didn't get in on Airbnb. Surely, parking and storage will be the next big thing, right? So we modeled our business after Airbnb. We looked at Airbnb's site. We were like, this is awesome. You get to it and you can figure out where you're going to go, and there's this big picture right there, and that's what we should do. We should build Airbnb, and it should look like Airbnb, except it's going to be parking and storage. Anybody have any idea what parking and storage photos look like? It looks pretty shitty. So we built, we sort of did this wireframe, and we like started to build it, and we realized, wow, those photos look like crap. So we're like, well, forget those photos. What if instead of the like parking photos and the storage photos, it was about people? So, instead of renting a space, you were renting it from people. So let's make it about people. And so, we then changed it, and then eventually that became this. And so, it was about the people, and like it had this nifty thing where it would change the person's name. So it would say rent a parking spot from, and it would give, insert your name in there if you'd listed a space. And, we thought we were really cool. And we launched this in September of 2011. We were on CBS, ABC, Fox, and whatever the other big network is, NBC, I guess, I don't know, whatever I left out. And all here in Philadelphia. We were like primetime news, and nobody cared. Like, nobody cared. And so you can see it in our data. Like, this was the company 3 months in. If you build consumer software, right? Like if you're like Snapchat or right? Like having 3,000 people show up to your site, it means like nobody cared, right? You've been on every major news network and nobody cares. And so we were like, this sucks. This is not a good idea. Like something's broken here, right? So we went back to our investors and we said, all right, we think there's one of three problems. Either it's a geographic problem, right? So maybe Philly just doesn't get it, right? Well, in November of 2011, we actually tested New York out. So we sort of felt like it wasn't the geography. Nothing really changed. Maybe it's the idea, right? Or maybe it's us. Like maybe we actually just suck. So we said, well, we hope it's not us. We don't think it's us. And I hope you don't either, investors. And because the first one's overruled, we already sort of feel like it's not the first one, it leaves only one option. It's just a bad idea, right? So we had spent about 25% of our investors' money at this point, and we went back to them and said, hey, we'll give you the rest back. Okay? And they said no. They said, well, you took our money, go figure it out. But by the way, you have 30 days to go figure it out. Now, some of you were like thinking about like starting a company and you're realizing like, wow, like to figure out your life's passion in like 30 days, like that sucks. Like if somebody said to you, like you've got to go figure out what you want to go spend, 18 hours a day and you got to figure out in 30 days. Well, like it's not the best thing to do in the world. But so we put Storably in storage, and we said, all right, well, we've got 30 days to figure it out, and we did this. We actually created a Google Doc. There were 3 of us at the time, my co-founder and I, and our first employee, and we each tasked ourselves every single day with just coming up with ideas, and we came up with 70 ideas in the next 30 days, and we did that like very independently. If you were able to actually see what's on here, you'd see a bunch of these ideas ultimately became other companies that got funded and whatever. But the idea that we really gravitated towards was a company that became Curalate, and that was idea number 63 on the list. So it was like fairly far down in the brainstorming process. But we became interested in this because in late 2011, we were seeing this website called Pinterest starting to really become a big deal. You could not open a magazine or turn on the TV or look at get online or whatever it was without hearing about this website Pinterest. And it felt a lot like Twitter in its early days. Brands were saying, "Look, I've got to be here because all these consumers are here." And we figured, well, hey, why not build something that can help brands understand Pinterest? And as we started to look at that, we realized, this wasn't about Pinterest, it was about pictures. And we realized it was something much deeper than that. That if you think about it, the human brain really hasn't evolved a lot in the last 50 years, but the information we're throwing at the human brain has gone up tremendously. And so what's happened is, today, brand marketers are in a battle for your attention. Because today, your attention span is shorter than a goldfish. It turns out that a goldfish actually can retain information longer than you. And that's because we are being thrown so much information that we need shortcuts. And it turns out the best shortcut that the brain can process is a picture. The MIT recently demonstrated that the brain can process an image in about 1/100th of a second. And it's a really quick way for the human brain to consume information. And so what you're seeing happening across the web is this massive migration to imagery and to people consuming imagery. So you're seeing people going from blogs to BuzzFeed, right? And the social web, Pinterest, is all about pictures. Tumblr, 75% of what's on Tumblr today is images without text, without hashtags. Of course, there's Instagram and Snapchat. Facebook itself, this is what Facebook used to look like, probably before you all were born. And this is what it looks like today. And Twitter has gone from being 140 characters to being 1,000 words, right? Everywhere you go today, we are consuming imagery and communicating in imagery. And here's the problem with that. I'll skip past all this. The problem with that is every single thing that has been built for the web is built around understanding text. And when people communicate in pictures, they don't use a lot of words. So if you're looking at that, if you look at an image like this, right? People post a picture of this and they say, "Love it, summer days." If you do a search for "love it" or "love" or "summer," what are you going to find? You're going to find a bunch of garbage. It's going to be stuff as a brand that's completely useless to you. So in a world in which people are communicating something very specific, this is a top from Lily Pulitzer, which is a client of ours. Somebody communicated about this. Somebody said, "I love this object here," which is a really specific love, right? It's specific to that product there. There's a lot of insight that can be gained there, but it's stuck. It's stuck in that picture that you can't search for. And so what we built at Curalate was the ability to actually read these images. And so what we do today is consume about 200 million pictures a day. We apply computer vision techniques, image recognition techniques to social media conversations. And we pull these images in and help brands understand what people care about. And we help brands understand what they should talk about and who they should talk to and how they should grow their audiences and what audiences are relevant and where those audiences exist. We bring that down to the product level. So, if you're Kate Spade in this case, we help you understand what products do people really care about right now. So they care about, your handbags and your dresses, not so much about, your shoes maybe. But we also do this for the images that you all take when you get over to Instagram. So we think about this connection between Pinterest and Instagram, or Tumblr and Instagram. Pinterest and Tumblr being a place where you save products before you're ready to buy them. We talk about that as being aspiration. This is the stuff I want to own one day. And then you go back out to Instagram after you bought it, and you take a selfie. You take a selfie, or you take a photo of your wrist, and you're like, hey, check out my new watch. We see this happen every single day. And it's the products that you aspire to and the products you celebrate. And what we've been able to do is apply these same computer vision techniques to being able to determine. This is a real example for Urban Outfitters. We saw this watch on somebody's wrist. We were able to find it in Urban's catalog. Similarly, here's a poster that somebody took in their room. It's like on a wall, it's on a corner, it's all bent, there's a bed in front of it, there's cushions and all of that, and yet, and it's been filtered, and yet we could find that poster in Urban's catalog, even though there's like a chair in front of it, right? And so that's what you have to be able to do in this world in which text doesn't really exist. How do you use computer vision techniques to do this? And by the way, you have to do it at scale, right? 200 million images a day coming through your system. You have about 20 milliseconds to process that image. And so it's a massive undertaking to do this. And so what we basically did is built 3 products. We're about 2.5 years old now, so we built these 3 products so far. And what that really allows people to do is understand what consumers want, engage with their community around those images. So when you post an image around Instagram, or you take something, you pin something to Pinterest, if you're doing it with one of the brands we work with, they see that, and they actually then interact with you and say, hey, thanks so much for talking about us, or hey, here's a 10% off coupon, whatever it may be. We actually help you find imagery to talk with, and then we help you drive revenue. So we actually take, if you're a brand like Nordstrom, they actually use Curalate to make their Instagram feed shoppable. So you can actually go on to Nordstrom's Instagram feed, and you can buy the images, you can buy the products that are represented in the images on their Instagram feed. And that's been a huge hit for brands like Nordstrom, and they see tremendous amounts of engagement and people buying stuff and clicking through and all this good stuff. And then we also take the photos that you folks create, and we bring it back onto brands' websites. So this is Lucky Jeans. These photos are all taken by fans. Fans go to Instagram, take a photo of themselves wearing the products, and it's all brought back onto their website. But now it's all made shoppable, so you can click on any of these. You can click on that girl wearing that top, and we connect it right to the product, and you can buy it. And the reason we really love this, though, is because not only does it drive a ton of revenue, it's an incredible way to drive loyalty. So this is an example from Urban Outfitters. A girl saw her photo on the Urban Outfitters website, got so excited because she kind of viewed Urban as like a celebrity in her mind, and she took a screenshot of her desktop, sent it to her phone, Instagrammed it, and then wrote, "This is so cool. I've been featured on Urban Outfitters website, one of my favorite stores. I'm hyperventilating." And this is the kind of brand love you just can't buy as a brand. It's authenticity that you just can't buy. And it's no longer about you talking about yourself. It's about you encouraging people to talk about you and celebrating those people who do so every single day. So that's what we do at Curalate, and that's what we do at Software. Can I answer any questions? Sir?
So you guys made a pretty big switch with
your
co-founder and an employee. This, I'm sure, is running on a very different technology.
The thing we had before was didn't have any technology. Yeah.
So how did you go to make that leap? How did you identify people with those skills, get them engaged?
It was tough. My co-founder, I'm grateful to have a co-founder who is as versatile as he is. He was able to very early on recognize that the problem that we were solving really was a computer vision problem, and he was able to use some off-the-shelf techniques to at least hack something together. And that was sufficient for us to go to very large brands and say to them, at a time when there was nothing else available, hey, is this useful to you? And that got us started. And once that got us started, we were able to then continue to raise capital. Once we were able to continue to raise capital, we were able to then attract more and more people into the business.
What do you think the future of your company will look like? Are you planning on adding any features or looking at something?
Oh, we're always adding stuff. Our product pipeline is incredibly robust. For us right now, we believe deeply in helping brands form deeper connections to consumers, and we think that you can do that in a lot of different ways. And there's a lot of different things that we want to build. But the problem set that we're operating in, this notion that consumers are communicating in a language that the web really hasn't been set up to understand, has really profound implications from a technology perspective and the software type of things, the types of software that you have to build. So we have been very aggressive about hiring computer vision scientists. We have 4 PhDs on our team now out of about 15 developers. And we're continuing to just grow that team. We're investing very heavily in technology. We believe that our mission ultimately is to decode imagery. And doing that is not a 1 or 2 year sort of endeavor. This is a 10-year endeavor to really do this. Yep.
How large were you when, or small were you when you made that switch?
We were 3 people. It was my co-founder and I and our first employee from Storably.
There was technical, your co-founder was technical?
Correct. Correct. Yep. Yep.
How if we move on to the others and then do a bunch of questions?
Whatever you'd
at the
like.
end? Is that okay?
Up to you.
Great. Let's do that. If you can
Great.
table them.
Hi everybody, I'm Jake. I'm a co-founder of RJMetrics. I do not have a presentation anywhere near as slick as Apu's or any presentation at all. I do have a few notes on my phone, so that's what I'll be looking at. So just in terms of structuring this to be most useful, if you guys want to interrupt me with questions, you don't have to wait for the end. But the couple points I wanted to hit were things around backstory of my company, how we got started, some of the things we did right, some of the things we did wrong. Maybe spend a couple minutes at the end just for those of you who are thinking about joining a startup rather than starting one yourself, at least as a first step, anything that I can offer to help on that, and then take it from there. So RJMetrics, our mission is to inspire and empower data-driven people. The company is about 6 years old. We did kind of both ends of the startup spectrum, where we bootstrapped for the first 3 years, didn't take a salary for the first year and a half, worked out of my co-founder's attic, kind of a lot of the stereotypical stuff. And then in the past 3 years, we raised 3 rounds of funding, totaling a little bit over $20 million, and have grown to 85 people and customers all over the world and lots of other different exciting stuff. The backstory, I was Wharton in 2006, finance and entrepreneurship. At that point, VC seemed like the most interesting thing in the world to me, and I just figured if I could skip the traditional steps of the way people get into venture capital and do that right out of school, that was exactly what I wanted to do. And at that point, there was one firm called Insight Venture Partners that recruited straight out of Penn, and I just put all my wood behind that one arrow. Unfortunately, got that job. So I worked there for 2 years, and it was a great experience. And the most valuable thing I learned was that I didn't really like venture capital that much. It was I learned a lot. It was it was amazing education about different kinds of companies, how different industries work. But ultimately, I just found that over the course of that 2 years, I was fortunate enough to talk to 1,000 different entrepreneurs, people that were at all different stages of starting their companies, some that were growing really fast, some that were not doing that great, some that were just getting started. But the consistent theme I saw was that I was just tremendously more excited about their jobs than about mine. And after that happened a bunch of times, and I kind of looked at the people that were a couple years ahead of me, and I realized I didn't really want their job, and I wanted all these folks' jobs. It was a pretty good signal that maybe I should make a change. And so I knew that I wanted to be in an operational role, either start a startup or join an early stage startup. And the nice thing about being in VC is that doing your job and looking for a new job is almost the exact same thing, because you're trying to talk to as many interesting startups as possible. And so I was kind of stealth doing both for a couple of months, and just had a challenge around 2 main things that. And I also had my own ideas that I was pursuing, and I was learning to become a slightly better programmer. I'm still terrible, but trying to get a little bit better, kind of nights and weekends. And my challenge was that of all the ideas, my ideas or other people's companies, I was just kind of so-so on them. And the bigger problem was that I was just so-so on the people. There were a lot of very smart people, a lot of very interesting people, but I felt like I could probably, have 5 lunch dates with Charlie Manson and not really know he was terrible. I just didn't. I figured if I was going to get into a relationship with somebody that hopefully would last many years, it was just very tough to be sure. And then fortunately, I just hit the lottery one day when one of my coworkers at Insight called a meeting of all the other junior people and was like, hey guys, I'm gonna quit and do this thing. And it was basically taking one of the things, my favorite part of that job, and building a software product out of it. And this was someone who I'd worked with for the past 2 years, and I thought the world of him, and this was like already something I liked a lot and something that was valuable, but was super painful, and I was like, yes. And I took him aside afterwards. I was like, Bob, this is a pretty good idea for you doing this, but what would be much better is if we did this. And he was like, oh, yeah, okay. So that was late 2008. I think I actually quit within less than 1 week, either plus or minus from when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. So it was like a very interesting time to explain to my family that yes, I had a very nice job and where I had to wear a suit to go to work, and now I'm going to be, wearing pajama pants in my friend's house and not taking a salary for the next year. But ultimately, it was 100% the right decision, and honestly not that risky, just because I think as you guys were thinking about your careers, the fact that you're at Penn in whatever way, shape, or form you are means that you can probably just get a job at any point. You're probably not going to starve. So the idea of rolling the dice at various points is not the riskiest thing in the world. I think the bigger risk is to not take that chance and see how far you can go. So in any case, what the product actually was, the initial germ of the idea was, so in venture capital, basically there's this process called due diligence. And so first you identify a company that you want to invest in. You have a lot of happy conversations with the entrepreneur. You say, okay, this business is doing that, we like it, we want to invest $1 million for 10% of the company, just pretend numbers. They agree, maybe you negotiate a little while, and then you enter in this process called due diligence. And there's two real purposes of due diligence. Number one is to just make sure that the VC firm is not totally screwing up, but also just to understand, get a much deeper dive into the business. So if you know a business is doing, let's say, $1 million a year in revenue, you might not know, there's all these different ways to characterize revenue. If you've taken accounting, there's GAAP, there's internal numbers, there's bookings, there's all these different things that it could mean. So in due diligence, you do deep dives in a bunch of different areas, on accounting, on finance, on legal, and Insight had a real focus on data analysis. Things like customer lifetime value and cohort analysis and repeat purchase rates and conversions through different steps of the funnel. And this was one of the main things they had junior people do. And we would get access to a big database of every transaction this business had ever done. We'd run a bunch of SQL queries. We'd download all that data. We'd put it into Excel. We'd pivot. We'd slice and dice. We'd do all this stuff, make a PowerPoint presentation, and then we would make that presentation to the people that actually made the decision, the partners, and they would use that as one of their inputs into whether or not to do the deal. And then if they did do the deal, they had us make that same presentation to the management of the portfolio company. And they loved it. There were very few other things in my life that got as positive feedback as that. And it wasn't all you're great. It was there's this problem. This is how we think about your business, and this part is awesome, but this part is actually really problematic, and you guys need to fix that. And it was terrifying the first time we did it, but after we got positive feedback a bunch of times, it was much better. And so essentially what was going on is that this was valuable for them, but they didn't really have the right people internally to run this analysis. Either because you needed some technical skills, you needed some analytical skills, you needed some business skills. So it wasn't that many people who had those three different skill sets. But if they did have those people, they were at a startup. They already had more than a full-time job. So to step back and run a big data analysis, this is before analytics was a very big buzzy thing. They just didn't have the time to dedicate to it. So what would happen is that a month or two after we did the deal, they would come back to us and say, hey, we've launched this new product, we've changed up this thing, we've tried this new marketing tactic, can you rerun that analysis? And we had very mixed feelings about it because it's great, we're adding value, and it's something that was valuable to our employer and valuable to these portfolio companies, so nice and pat ourselves on the back. But it took hours and hours and hours. It was very manual, and it was very brittle. It was a bunch of saved SQL queries that we had to find and replace and change the variable, and then they changed the database schema, and everything would break. And so again, Bob deserves all the credit for coming up with the idea. He was like, I shouldn't be doing this, a computer should be doing this. And that was originally where we set out to start the idea. So we moved from New York back down to Philly. I was in Center City then, and he was in the suburbs. We're both in Center City now. And we're in his attic. And basically, we just started on day one, and I showed up October 1st, 2008, and I was like, all right, how do we get rich? And it wasn't something we could actually finish in the first day. We're still working on it. But essentially, one of the things I think was most important that we did in the beginning, and one of the things that when I have friends who started startups that didn't work out, I think this was one of the most common mistakes, is, and we didn't really have this mental framework, but now looking back, it's how I understand it, is we validated our riskiest assumption first. So I think a lot of times when you're starting a company, there's like a bunch of different things that need to work out in order for the company to be successful. The product needs to be technically feasible. Like there are certain things that you could want to do with a computer that is just impossible to do. And if you can do that thing, you need to make sure that you can get in front of customers. And then if you can get in front of customers, you need to be able to charge them or monetize in whatever way you want to, whether it's advertising or direct sales or affiliate fees or whatever. So for us, what we had basically kind of done it before. You know, like we had done it a really JV version, totally manual, it took forever, but it was like, okay, what we're trying to do is hard, and to do it well is really hard, but it's not like we're trying to solve the traveling salesman problem. Like that's not what we're doing. It's like, can we get this data to the right people at the right time and help them make their business better with it? So the riskiest assumption for us was, is anyone going to actually pay us for this? And so literally on day one and for the next 4 months before we had any product to sell, I just talked to every single person I could and tried to convince them to give me money for this product that didn't exist. And I got just a never-ending series of no's until we got a yes in January 2009. But it was like such an amazing education about our customer base and about what our product should be and our marketing message and our positioning. Just having all those people say no, and then I would ask why, and then they'd say because of X, Y, and Z. And then the next time I had a conversation, I would say, well, we can do X, Y, and Z. And the product didn't exist at that point. Like Bob was like furiously programming upstairs, and I was having these conversations downstairs. And I didn't like lie. I didn't say the product does this. I was like, well, we're going to offer you this. It's going to be a 4-month implementation or whatever I said at the time. And eventually, when we got someone to say yes, we were about a month away from a working product. So I just sold them a 1-month implementation period, and it just worked out that way. So I think whatever you're doing, I would say just focus on the thing that if that one thing doesn't work, the whole thing's not going to work, and try to validate that regardless of where it is in the logical steps of progression. One of the things I think we didn't do that well was we waited way too long to focus on repeatability. Like so, the good thing we did is early on it's like no beta users, everybody's a paying customer. Day one, we want this thing is valuable, you should pay us for it, and keep going on that. And then we got a handful of customers, and then we got 10 customers, and then we got 20 customers, and that whole time we were just very focused on tactically executing. It was all like, how do we get the next customer? How do we roll out the new feature? How do we get just enough revenue to hire that next person? Which was, there are the right things to focus on, but our goal was to turn it into a much bigger business. And so what we should have thinking about, like, okay, we've got 10 customers. We're like covering our costs, considering we don't have office space, and we're not taking salaries, and we're not paying for anything else. So like we have almost no costs, so we're profitable. But how do we get that to 20 customers? How do we get that to 200 customers? And I think for the first 3 years of the business, when we were bootstrapping it, we had the luxury and the misfortune of not having a boss or an authority figure. Like we'd gone from my parents to my teachers to my boss to nobody, and then there wasn't really anybody saying like, "That's not good enough. Go faster." And so I think some people may have that on an intrinsic basis, and I think I have that to some degree. But one of the most valuable things we got from our investors and having outsiders on our board was to have recurring meetings where someone who I feel an obligation not to disappoint asks, well, you said you were going to do that last time. Has that happened? And like, I just like can't not do homework. I don't have that in me. So when I agree to do something, like it's just so useful to have that thing pushing you along. So that's something we waited a little bit too long to focus on. I think we're better at it now, but it's still a challenge I have. I think I had one more thing on this. And one other thing that I think is just useful to think about with like startup ideas and startups in general is that I think sometimes people place a little bit too much of a focus on a good idea, like, oh, if I can only get a good idea, that will be the thing. And I think Apu's presentation illustrated this beautifully. I have never been in an environment where there was a shortage of good ideas. The whole challenge is not doing almost everything. Like if Apu had tried to do 70 of those things or 2 of those things on that list, there's no chance he would be as successful as he is right now. And like so, one of the biggest challenges for me is that like so we have one product and we've put all of our effort into that one product, and we have ideas for like 20 other products. We have ideas for way more than that, but we have like some good ideas for things that literally our customers have asked us for. And we've been making this like decision that every step along the way is, do we decide to roll out another product now? Do we invest more in our existing product? We have a lot of people that use that. Should it be an extra feature on our product? Like, there's all these things, but the real challenge is to say no over and over again and then put like tremendous time and energy into the one thing rather than, having someone tell you, oh, this is a good idea. Like every good idea we've ever done has been independently brought up to us 10 times. And it's really just deciding, okay, this is the day that we're going to do that idea and not do the 100 other good ideas that we have. How am I doing on time?
Good.
Okay. So I'll spend just a couple minutes on like getting a job at a startup. So the most important thing, what you guys should all do is stop listening to the rest of the thing I say. Go to rjmetrics.com/jobs. That is how you get a job at a startup. We're hiring for about a dozen different things across the company. That's a great place to work. End of plug. So one of the things I think is kind of like it's a little bit of a hackneyed saying, but I think there's a lot of truth to it about working at a startup, is that if someone offers you a seat on a rocket ship, you don't ask which seat, you just get on. And I think that's not 100% true, but that's actually like a useful way to think about it. Because I do actually think the company is significantly more important if you're getting your first job at a startup, more important than the position. Like there are multiple people at my company that are on their third or fourth job title. And that's just because we are creating new job titles all the time. And if we know someone is awesome and we have a need and that person says, I would like to do that, it's like, great, good. You have to train the person that we hire to fill your role. We have to hire somebody if we think this person is going to be great. Sometimes we say no, that's fine. We might want someone who's done this before. And that person says, okay, and they keep doing the job that they're already doing well at. But I think I have some friends who graduated Wharton at the same time as me, went into banking or hedge funds or whatever, consulting, and they are very focused on their first job at a startup being senior director of whatever, or VP of whatever. And that's awesome if they can get it. But I think that severely, severely limits their opportunity set. And so our first hire is a guy who took a 50% pay cut from a company that is hundreds of people and going to go public very soon. And moved down to when we were working out of Camden, New Jersey. So it was like glamour after glamour after glamour. He applied for a position that we were hiring front-end designer. And he sent me an email. He's like, Jake, I lack virtually every qualification in your job description. However, I think we should talk. And so it was great. It was like the best job application I've ever gotten. And then he basically started as engineer. And today he's our VP of engineering. He manages 20 different people, or maybe now it's 25. He was our director of engineering. At one point, he was our head of product management. He's done a bunch of different things and evolved with the company. We were his second job out of college. And I think there are some people that have 10 years of experience that we've also hired to be the VP of something else. But I think if you go into this line of work, I would under-optimize around position and even potentially department just to find a place where you can learn from the right people, because those people are going to be your co-founder in your next company. They're going to learn a lot. There's also just this kind of unfair thing about being associated with successful businesses. And I know it happens to us, where we see someone who was an early employee at Invite Media. That was a company in Philly that started here and then sold for $80 million to Google. And then if I interview the guy who swept the floors at Invite Media, I was like, wow, this guy must be really good. He knows how to sweep the floor and get acquired by Google for $80 million. He knows what he's doing. And versus someone who worked at another company that I never heard of, that person has an unfair advantage. So any way you can ascertain that signal of who's going to has that validation and that traction, whether it's fundraising, whether it's just asking them straight up what their revenue growth is or how many people they're hiring and the trajectory of that, I think that's all really useful. And then the one other thing I'll say before I close, just in terms of how to get a job at a startup, like the logistics of once you identify the company, how do you get the job? The two things which I'm just shocked that more people don't do is number one, just do much more work than everyone else probably is. We have an online form where you submit your information to apply, and we have 140 character box and say, tell us what makes you unique. And some people just miss the point of it entirely and write NA. Or they'll paste in their cover letter there, and it's to whom it may and then it stops. And obviously these people are terrible. Most people say oh, I juggle, or oh, I whatever. I've had people write me a whole post on Medium that factoring in what things we have in common and talking about inside jokes that we mentioned on our blog. There's no way in hell that person is not going to get an interview. Or we have people do tasks before they get an in-person interview, where they have to use our product, our demo version, to do something, or leave a voicemail and someone will show them that they know how to talk on the phone if it's like a sales job. And some people will like really do the work and like bring in, like we have inside jokes all throughout our blog and our demo, like they'll reference that stuff, or they'll make it so that it's a direct voicemail to someone at our company. Like everyone on our About Us page has a little funny anecdote about them. Like there are all these things that if you just spend an extra half an hour, like it's so easy to stand out from the crowd of the 1,000 other people that are doing it. And for us, we're not necessarily looking for people who have a tremendous amount of experience in data analytics and columnar data stores and Hadoop or the other technologies that we use. I mean, that's very nice, but we're looking for really smart people who can learn fast, who care a lot about what we're doing. And caring a lot is like the hardest signal to get, and any way you can just signal by spending extra time and doing that work makes it so easy to stand out from the pack and get that interview. I think that's it.
Hey guys, I'm Danny, and I don't have PowerPoint or notes on my phone, but I do have a few bullet points that I want to talk about. So anyway, I'm one of the founders of Biobots, and we sell 3D printers that print with living tissue. And before I get more into that, I just want to start with the first bullet point, which is a little bit of history of how I started doing this. So I just graduated from Penn. I'm engineering 2014. I graduated in May. Studied computer science and biology, and I was going to go get a PhD in bioengineering at Penn before I started doing this. I had a friend who I had been friends with all through college, and he was working on tissue engineering research. He was going to go off to med school. And one day he gives me a call. He's like, hey man, you got to stop by my dorm room. I've got this sweet thing I've been hacking on for the past couple months. It's awesome. Come take a look. And so I show up to his dorm room. He opens the door. He's got this like thing in his hand. It looks kind of like an ear, and it's like wiggly and like wiggly material. And I'm just like, what the fuck are you doing, And he like shows me this box he's built. It's like all hacky. It's like moving in 3 dimensions. He's like, look man, I built this 3D printer. It extrudes this material. We can like grow cells on it. I don't know what to do with it, but it's awesome. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm like flying out to California tomorrow to interview at Caltech. Like I'll like go pitch it to everybody I talk to. And so I did that. I like went to my interviews at Caltech, and I like just talked to all the professors. I was like, hey, like I've got this device. Like, what do you think? You think it's cool? And they're like, oh yeah, like it's sweet. It sounds like these other things that cost like $250,000. How much? Like, are you guys trying to sell it or something? I was, no, I just have like, but wait, do you want to buy it? And one of the guys was like, yeah, I'll buy it. Like, how much are you looking to sell it for? And I was like, $5,000, and he's like, okay, yeah, sure. So the next day, I get back home, I send him an invoice for $5,000, and he buys this like hacky tacky thing. I'm just like, all right, well, we have something here, right? Like it makes sense. So then, like at all my interviews that I had, I ended up doing the same thing. I mean, I didn't make any other sales, but I did like just pitch it around, and like got a lot of interest. And I was like, all right, well, I mean, maybe there's actually something here that's working out. Maybe we should start doing this. So I guess fast forward, did that. I mean, was so in school, trying to graduate and do this on the side. It was pretty tough. There was also like Penn had like an innovation competition. We entered, we won, got some money from that. And as soon as I like graduated, I emailed my grad school people here at Penn that I had gotten in. I was like, hey guys, I'm actually not going to be coming on. I'm gonna just work on this startup full time. Now keep it in mind, I had zero money in the bank, no savings whatsoever. Ricardo, co-founder, no savings. Nobody had any savings. Nobody had any money. All we had was like $10,000 that we had just made, and we're like, all right, let's see what we can do with this. And we started building these printers, like trying to just get them around, sell them for whatever we could. Sold one to Penn for like dirt cheap. I think it was like $300, just because we needed to get money to do something else, like and keep going. And I guess a couple months later, we ended up, we were running out of cash, basically just doing R&D and trying to figure out what to do. I was, at the time there was 2 of us working full time. Ricardo was like building the devices, and there wasn't any software to go with them. So I started building the software. I started CompSci Bio. I was like, yeah, I could do some software, And I took some open source stuff from like classic traditional 3D printers. Basically, like I was working, like my senior design thesis was like on, I don't know, just like some weird DNA parsing thing, and I just adapted that to modify the the code that was being generated by the open source stuff to work with bioprinters. And it worked, so it was pretty hacky, but that's like still what we're running off of. It's just like now it's prettier, but it's pretty funny. And let's see, then finally I had this product that we could like reliably build. Took in some investment money from an accelerator, Dream It Health Philly. So that was literally, that started like in July maybe. So like keep in mind the time frame here. Like May, graduated, like 1 or 2 months, no money. Then took in $50,000 from Dream It Health. Moved over there, worked there, just graduated from the class. So it was a great program. And we just graduated there. Now we're just, next version's out. We have a new product, sexier, better, faster, cheaper. And all right, so that's the history. That's where we are now. I guess, we've got a lot more people on the team now also. We've got somebody who just does operations, we did have somebody who was doing full-time software. Now that that's sort of taken care of, we don't have somebody doing full-time software anymore. And let's see then. Along those few months, I don't even know how many it's been, like 8 months I've been doing this. I've learned a few things, and I think the first one is just a little note on talking to people. That's the way that this all started, was me just talking to people about what I was working on. And I guess it all started with Ricardo talking to me about what he was working on, and like knowing that I was going to be excited about it, and knowing that I would go out of my way and try to pitch it to other people. So I was basically like going around selling something that I didn't have. I was selling this product that didn't even really work. There wasn't any software to go with it, and I think that's key, is that you don't really have anything until somebody's paying you for it. Sort of like what was mentioned already. But like my philosophy was that, hey, you know what? If these people pay us and we can't get the product to them later on, then we'll just send them their money back. Like, it's not the end of the world. And we haven't had to do that yet, so it's been okay. And then another point is testing your hypotheses, which is, was also mentioned. But the way that we work in general is just that, we have these fundamental hypotheses about our business, and it's this technology is going to actually enable people to do something that they weren't able to do before, and so they're going to pay us for it. And so the best way to test that was to go see if that was true. And now it's, and it's all sort of, we have a very scientific approach to it. So we do have experiments. So we entire business is sort of run these experiments. It's a little silly, but it works for us, and we have data, and we are very data driven on our experiments. And so those were all the talking points that I had. Now I can tell you a little bit more about the company and the product, because it's the best part. So like I said, it's basically, you can think about it as a 3D printer that, instead of using plastic as a material, actually uses a solution of materials that can integrate into the body and living cells. And you can actually build 3-dimensional living structures with it. So things like basically living tissue. And we don't focus on that aspect of it. We just sell the devices, and there's a sort of, we develop new technology that allows you to even build these structures in 3D. And there's a secret sauce component in there that you need to put into your material in order for it to work. And we sell that also. Okay, so that's what we sell. And our customers are basically researchers in biology, bio researchers. Initially, the first guys were all biomaterials people who had awesome materials that they've tested on the body, and they're like, well, you could print this stuff, and we're like, yeah, you could try it, and it worked. So those are the first guys, and now we're really trying to target, all of biology today exists in 2-dimensional tissue culture. So when you screen drugs, you test them first on these petri dishes, 2D tissues, which isn't very accurate. It doesn't really scale to the body or 3D tissues. And so we offer people the capabilities of actually building 3-dimensional tissues, which are much more accurate, and we do it at a super low cost. And that's pretty much it.
Questions?
I have one about the biobots. Are you concerned about patents, or are you looking for patents?
Yeah, so we've got, we're pursuing 2 patents on our tech. And we are worried about infringing other people's patents, but not too much, because we've been able to, there's nothing too strong standing right now in the space, nothing too general. So we've been able to dodge around a lot of it. And I think we're in a position to get 2 really good ones, really strong ones. But that's totally a key question, especially in the 3D printing space. It's sort of been already plagued by IP. So.
So I have a question for Jake. So you started a software company without any software experience, or almost no software experience as a working graduate. So how did that pay out? And are you now working on coding, and like why?
So yeah, I had taken computer science classes both like in high school and in college, but had never professionally programmed. I had done some small side projects and things like that. My co-founder, he had a more hardcore computer science background, and in our old job wrote more code than I did. But as all of the engineers we have since hired have told us many times that we are still terrible at it. So like I think the important thing for us was getting something out the door that customers would actually want, and some of that came back to bite us because we had not had traditional like software engineer training that you would get in any entry-level computer science job. So a lot of that has been virtually everything we wrote in the early days has since been rewritten and replaced a couple different times, like not all at once, but in different components. There's still like a little bit of old code here and there, the parts that don't change very often. But I mean, I think it was very, very important that we could rapidly prototype things, that we could present something that did deliver some incremental value in the beginning. But very quickly, I mean, as soon as we hired our first person, he basically said, okay, you guys are doing all this stuff wrong. Let's change this, let's fix this, let's have version control. That was the thing that was pretty new to us. So lots of like just like super foundational things we didn't have. But now we have like developed a culture of engineering excellence and trying to do best practices and presenting at conferences and stuff like that. It's a big change from the Wild West from when we got started.
So you don't code in any way anymore? Or?
So we had a hackathon this past week, and so I had to learn Java to do my project, and so now I'm a terrible Java programmer. But like day to day, no, I don't write anything. Yeah.
I have a question for Jake as well. So you talked about working in VC before starting a startup, and I think a lot of Penn students are like in that like dilemma, like choosing between working in VC or private equity versus like taking a job in a startup. So could you talk more about like how maybe working in VC prior to starting your startup helped you? Or
Yeah, I definitely think it helped me, but that has nothing to do with why I did it. And I think so. I worked in VC because I thought VC was the most interesting thing, and so I really want like if at that point I wanted to work in startups or start a startup, I think I would have just done that first. I'm all about doing what I want now, just because I'm selfish and impatient. But like I do think there's a lot that I got out of that experience of working in VC first. Part of it was just learning about 1,000 other companies from the people that were starting them. It's a education that's very hard to get any other way. Just because like they're willing to talk to you because your bosses have tens of millions of dollars that they can maybe give to them. And I was, standing in between them and all that money, so it was worth having that half an hour conversation with me. I think it was also just really valuable to learn how the VC firm looked at startups. And so understanding when we went to go raise money, what deal terms are important, how to pitch it, understanding like what the implications are of fundraising decisions or bootstrapping decisions. So I think there's a lot of stuff that I got that was very valuable out of it. I think that if I knew straight away that I wanted to start a startup, I think if I'd spent those 2 years trying to start a startup, that probably would have been better, I guess, but I haven't lived that life yet.
So you guys have both built out technical sides of your organizations from here in Philly. Is there anything you wish you would have known? Do you find it to have been more challenging than perhaps in another geography? You bring people in from outside. Like how have you been able to that sort of
We now have 3 offices. We have an office in Seattle, we have an office in New York, and it's for that reason. That one of the things that when you start to really start to like hit hypergrowth, is that you find that people are your biggest constraint on growth. It no longer becomes customers, and so I think Philly continues to be a fantastic market. It's where the bulk of our employees are. By Seattle, which is where one of our offices has been a fantastic place to pick up engineering talent. You have Amazon, you have Microsoft. The challenge, of course, is those people pay because they're trying to retain these engineers that want to leave for other places. They're paying their engineers $300,000, right? as a startup, we're not going to pay somebody $300,000 for a non sort of leadership sort of, running all of engineering for like a staff engineering position. So you start to find the people who really want to do this, because they're going to take a fairly substantial pay cut to do this, but they really believe in what they're doing as a result. And so we've been really successful in Seattle and in New York in adding talent. But to do it, you really have to have culture bearers in your organization that you can seed in your different locations, so you don't end up with 3 different offices. Our offices are literally painted the same colors. And we have members of our founding team. My co-founder now sits in New York for this reason, because I don't want to have, I don't want us to all get together and have like a New York versus Philly versus Seattle culture. Like that's not, that will kill your organization.
Yeah, and so just for us, we still have everybody in one office in Philly. Definitely, I think if you talk to virtually any successful startup, people are going to be the biggest challenge for sure. We've thought a little bit about either opening another office or having remote workers. So far, it hasn't made sense for us, but I think there's definitely pros and cons. And just the one other thing I'd add to what Apu said is, I think the interesting thing about Philly versus New York or San Francisco or Seattle, I think it varies very much by role and seniority. So like virtually all of our junior members of our team have been people that we did not relocate from other geographies, and a pretty big percentage of our senior team is. So like if you need a salesperson who's led a team of 20 people of inside sales selling product that goes for between $500 and $5,000 a month, there's not a huge number of those in Philadelphia. But if you need like a really excellent computer science person with 1 to 2 years experience, there's a bunch of those here. If you need the best computer vision expert in the world, that person probably doesn't live here. You're going to need to really cook them somewhere. So it depends on the role a lot, and I think it's easier to recruit for some things here than another geography, and harder. It just kind of depends on what you need.
Okay, how about one last question? I'm gonna have, because I know you tried a little bit, so.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about validating your ideas and assumptions. Can you talk to us more about the process of elimination? What type of metrics did you use to narrow down your ideas from 80 to 1?
So one of the things, we were in this kind of interesting place where we had some money from the prior idea that didn't work, and we had a team. And when you are faced with a situation like that, you actually start to match your ideas against your interests, your actual passions, right? Because at the end of the day, you're going to be spending a lot of time doing this thing. If you don't love it, and for me, when I look back on like storage, right? Like our first customer in storage was quite literally a hoarder, right? We went to his house and it was stacked to the ceilings with junk, right? When we made this transition to Curalate, shortly after we became Curalate, one of our clients, Neiman Marcus, invited us to a party at South by Southwest, this really tiny little party, and we go to it and it's wall-to-wall models. Okay. Like, you tell me which one you'd rather be in, right? And like there was something about that you're like, well, I'd much rather, not that I had like I wasn't trying to, but I would much rather be around the models. So, there was an element of passion to this thing, right? And my background was as a marketer, and my co-founder is a machine learning guy, and Brendan, our first employee, is this like social media savant, and he was like 21 years old, and he's a social media native, and like that's what he knows. And so for us, it was a lot about like taking our passions and skill sets and matching it against the ideas. That narrowed the field down a lot. And then the other sort of lens we looked at was uniqueness. So the tech, the nice thing about software is you can build practically anything. That's awesome. The problem with it is you can build anything. And so most things you go into, somebody's already built it, right? We ended up finding this space that nobody had entered in before, and that's really rare in software. And so we felt like we had this opportunity that we could go after. And then we found really quick ways to test it. We used Twitter basically to get ourselves in front of people we literally gave them fake data, and we got in front of them, and they had no way to disprove that data, and we knew we were onto something, right? We were like, we literally tweeted Oscar de la Renta, and we were like, hey, did you know you had 10 million impressions on Pinterest last week? And they're like, what? Can you come to our office? Sure. It worked. You know, you got to do these things to like, you know, when you're small, you have nothing to lose. Like, nobody's going to sue you. You have nothing to lose at that point. You have to do things a little bit differently when you get a little bit larger. But yeah, we still buy. It's always been a thing.
Let's give everybody a round of hand and then